Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to do this evening in English. Luider? Zei iemand dat? Ik hoorde iemand iets zeggen, nee? Ja, nou. Goedenavond, dus nogmaals. My name is Yoeri Albrecht. I'm the director of the Balie, and I'm going to try to conduct this conversation with the main guest of this evening, Tomáš Libertíny. Artist, son of an architect and historian. And why do I mention this? Well, that will be sort of later more clear why that's important. I'm standing here in between two of his works, who are generously loaned to us by a private collection. We're very happy about that because I visited Tomáš twice now over the past months, and I'm totally in awe by the works I've been seeing. And we're very, very happy that we are able to talk to Tomáš Libertíny and listen to him and enjoy his most amazing pieces of work. We will talk about them later more in detail, but this is Kemal Atatürk, that's Nefertiti, two of the more striking personalities in history. And what strikes me among many things here is that I love those museums where they have these portraits of the Romans, where you pass by and you see these faces of the Roman emperors or the nobility. And that's something which belongs to a very long past. And the way you were able to reinvent sort of the old language of the buste, totally natural and totally contemporary art, is among many things very impressive about it, I think. And that's a way of looking at the art of Tomáš Libertíny, which to me is very, very, makes me very enthusiastic, that there's sort of long history and a deep roots, many ways of looking at it, philosophical or just practical or maybe just beauty. And those layered aspects of it is, to me, I've tried to study philosophy, and there's many things in it which are either architecture, history, philosophy. Anyway, Tomáš Libertíny, born in Slovakia, living in Rotterdam for the past decades. During his studies in Bratislava, Seattle, and Eindhoven, he focused on technique, design, painting, conceptual design. His works are in collections all over the world. Just to mention a few: the MoMA, the Museum Boijmans Van Beuningen, and the Palais de Louvre, and like I said, the Lakeside Collection. We're going to listen to Tomáš. We asked him to say something about his art to be able to then have a conversation on it. We asked Kirian Esser, which we do actually quite often, to read a part of a novel later on, and I will introduce that later on in between, because maybe we touch on literature, maybe we don't, but it's good to have Kirian with us to be able to read some important texts. I leave the floor to Tomáš Libertíny and give him a warm applause. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Yoeri, for the lovely introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate it. It's an honor. Just want to double check everybody hears me well, because I'm taller and the distance is dubious. So, yes, presentation. I would like to just quickly, before I engage with Yoeri in a conversation, to present a little bit my background, my fascinations, and also a little bit about my work. And the presentation is split in, let's say, three sections. First one is my general inspiration, my passions, things I find really interesting, and things that guide me in the way I look in the world, but also the way I pick and choose things to make and to let make by the bees. And the second part is the work itself, and there are two metaphors that are interesting there that I want to guide you through, and then hopefully we touch on different subjects on the behind the table. So yeah, my name is Tomáš Libertíny. And one of the things that I really found interesting since the early childhood was things that just really surprised me, thinking outside of the box, things that kind of were not orthodox, but I like classics. And like classics very much, and you can see it already here in the works that I do, but I always like a little twist to the established norms. And maybe that is why I also got into doing box. So literally I try to learn how to box, and it's also one of those classic sports. So yeah, bit of a surprise in a classicism is something that I find really interesting. And I was always curious as a kid. Like, it was really fantastic to be just like a few days before Christmas and trying to find all the presents hidden all around the apartment, and I just couldn't let it go. And I destroyed all the radios and electronics, looking behind them, how they work, and disassembling them to tiny pieces, but not being able to put them back together, which didn't make my parents really happy. But yes, curiosity is something that leads me in my work. And the third part that I find fascinating is technology. Technology is one of those things that liberate me in the way that I work, but also liberate us in the way we can see the world around us, whether it's a micro or macro. This is just a really good example of electron microscope. And these are the pictures of pollen, different types of pollen from flowers. But it's amazing to see that sometimes the geometries and the principles that guide the world on the macro level can be also seen in a micro level, never seen before. I mean, people who've seen this maybe 150 years ago or 100 years ago were the first people to see a universe in the other way around, which I find incredible. The same goes for observing universe above us. And one of those things is also the limitation that planet, nature imposes on us. I can't go back with, I was told no red button on this. But the nature as a subject is very dear to me because it's something that constantly surrounds us. And you could see it with the microscope image. The fascination with the micro world is also connected to the fascination with the macro world. And I'm a big fan of Carl Sagan and all the series that he made, lovely series that he made, which are both very technological and very human, very hopeful. And I find nature as a core of my inspiration. So there is this thing that I look at how things work and how limiting it is, the planet on which we live in. And we are not meant for the rest of the universe. We are bound to this blue, pale dot, as Carl Sagan called it. And it's extremely fragile. This whole thing, us living on a planet that seems as if there is no end to it, is actually a very finite universe by itself, and we are somehow slowly forgetting that we need to take care of it, and it's a very fragile ecosystem. And yet, there's the universe itself, and the contrast, as much as it is fragile, the universe is also extremely powerful, dangerous, threatening. And I like this dialectics about life. We tend to look at nature as something extremely romantic. Just look at the David Attenborough's National Geographic Discovery Channel. I don't know where they play it, but I think it's this National Geographic sometimes. There is a certain poetry to nature, which we try to seek naturally because there is some soothing element to it, that once we were in peace and now we are in a struggle. But a universe is neither kind nor it's brutal. There is some kind of a universal thing to it that's universe is. And I wanted to show you these two sides of it. It's extremely fragile, but it's also extremely brutal. So there was a picture of a black hole, but I'm sure you already know. And I love the fact that we are so limited. We will maybe talk about it in terms of literature that we have spoken about with Yoeri when he visited my studio. But somehow we are so limited to the planet Earth, and we were conceived by the conditions that laws of physics imposed on us, and somehow we managed to escape this limitation, and we turned up on the moon itself, where everything is against us. But this human ingenuity, being able to manipulate conditions around ourselves, led us to be somewhere where we were not supposed to be. And that is, we were born swimming in gas. Like fish are born swimming in water, we are swimming in gas. And here we are in conditions that are not meant for us, yet we were able to surpass it. And I keep that challenge always in front of me, like how can I translate that something is natural, but I can push it forward to do something incredible. And that's also not limited only to universe itself and technology, but again, biology and human body. And I use Arnold Schwarzenegger a lot in my presentations because it's one of those examples where you do nothing external, you by a repetitive and almost monk-like process, you work on something very natural, which is the biology itself, and you manipulate it to be something it's not meant to be. It's something very fleeting. These bodybuilders look like this maybe for a couple hours during the competition, where they completely dehydrate, and this is their fantastic look that they present. But it's this very microscopic piece of what they do, and I find it fascinating that you're able to manipulate your own body, just like I manipulate nature to do something incredible. Unlike bodybuilding, this will last thousands of years. And speaking of limitations, again, it's a very fascinating thing to see how very thin, razor sharp this thing between life and death is, and how we were, again, created by the conditions on the planet Earth. And when you talk about silence, for example, sometimes you tell to a partner or a friend, like, shut up, I need quiet. Well, this is an example of one of those silent rooms, one of the laboratories in the United States, where there's, I think, minus 23 decibels, so complete silence doesn't exist, but as much as possible. And here you are not supposed to last very long because your brain shuts down. You could literally die in the most quiet room in the world because your brain is not able to process the silence, the lack of information that comes from the noise. And you start to hear your own heartbeat, your blood pumping through your veins, and your brain shuts down. So in a way, it's a very shallow and thin line between life and death. And then there's this element of, okay, where am I in this whole thing? How can I manipulate it? How can I co-create with nature? Now, and because I studied design, I always find fascinating the whole question what design is in essence, because it appears first in art and then later in industrial production, but the element of creating with a certain strategy is always present in the human creation. And this is an example of a design of a meteor, an asteroid, sorry, in this case. And it has a certain form, it has a certain shape, is governed by things that happen to it, but it's very consistent when you look overall in the way asteroids look like. They look very similar to this. And this form finding in nature, I thought, is really fascinating. So then you look in art and how form and how would I say, the matter and the form coexist together, where this is an example of sculpture, Rodin, how similarly to Michelangelo sees the figure in a stone and is able to carve it out to the point where you feel the figure is almost as if growing out of the stone itself. So it's completely natural. And it takes a certain time for an artist to understand the material he works with. So in my case, understanding how the bees work and be able to co-create with it. So all these legendary sculptors from marble were able first to understand the material itself and then be able to extract the figures from it. And then there is this beautiful element with technology that allows us to see beyond material things. And science has brought us to the point where we can peek behind the, invisible universe. And that element was something that brought me to also to work with the bees, where I try to find something or create something invisible that it's already there. This is one of the best examples of arte povera that I know, one of the artists that I really admire. He was recently shown in the Netherlands, Giuseppe Pennone from Italy. And he found out and created this beautiful idea of carving a tree inside a tree. And it's not just any tree inside a tree, it's the original tree inside a tree trunk. So it's the baby tree that was covered by layers and layers of skin on top of each other until it created this gigantic, massive piece of wood. But I always thought it was a beautiful metaphor for life itself. I am the 5-year-old me is just hidden inside. We all carry that little Tomáš, little Yoeri inside us, and it's beautiful to look at it in that kind of beautiful contrast that this fragile little thing is still there. So I'm sure everybody knows it, but I encourage you to look at the work of Giuseppe Pennone again, because I find it just a beautiful contrast between strength and fragility, time and presence and nature itself. Because in essence, Giuseppe Pennone doesn't design anything. He just reveals what is already there. So it's almost like Dieter Rams, like no design. There's no design in it. It is what it is. So I come now to my work, and I have these two small metaphors that I use in my work. The first one is the skin metaphor. I'm fascinated by the skin as an idea, something that covers, something that protects, and something that grows. And because nature is something that I work with, specifically the bees, the flowers, in essence, are very connected to this. So this is something that I made a very long time ago, but it's a picture of a polystyrene sphere that you usually buy in flower shops when you want to make an ikebana. So they sell these polystyrene spheres, very smooth, and there are different sizes, and you stick these flower compositions together on top of this core. And they're usually smooth because they're injection molded inside the steel forms. And what I did was take a pincette and took every cell on the outside of this smooth polystyrene ball, and one by one I peeled the whole thing away and created this very complex, unnerving object from polystyrene, which was very time-consuming. I went through many spheres because I didn't succeed in not damaging them. And there's something monk-like about it that I like. But again, it's the skin metaphor, the fragility and the protection, the smooth versus the rough inside. So having shown Pennone, that kind of contrast between the external and the internal. Another example of an artwork based on sort of natural form. I love these. So in my work, there's lots of repeating elements such as cocoons, seeds, cocoons, eggs, and like several of them. And this is one of those, the large cocoon and mushrooms-like shapes. This is, for example, made from welding. Again, very repetitive process, layer on layer of continuous welding. I created this machine that allows me to add weld on top of another weld by hand. So it's not a robotic arm doing it, with all these imperfections that come with it. And again, very time-consuming. But the final object is this beautiful, almost as if self-grown steel from nature. And then I also work with glass. This was made for Venice Biennale. As you can see, that's the Palazzo Franchetti, the opposite of Accademia. And I was asked to work with the Murano glassblower. So it was this beautiful chance to reiterate these ideas about geometries and nature in glass. And I work with this company that makes perfume bottles. So I was paired or contacted them to make these different colored elements of glass that they usually make flacons from, flacon being the bottles, and created this continuously growing Gothic-like window that actually looked like a piece of a honeycomb, but made from glass. So these are fantastic. And in the light is just incredibly powerful. If you have a sunlight hitting these pieces of glass, it's constantly changing. And then there's the beehive metaphor. So this was about the skin. And the beehive metaphor originally started as something very unexpected. I read this fantastic book by Dostoevsky called Brothers Karamazov. And the introduction of the book is really interesting because, to me at least, first time in literature I've seen an introduction where the writer warns us, dear reader, no, dear Tomáš, dear Yoeri, be aware you're going to read a book about a hero that's actually not a hero in a normal kind of sense where, you know, Greek heroes have all these incredible qualities or one way or another, so two extremes, whether they're extremely good or extremely bad. This hero is actually quite normal, quite boring. There's nothing spectacular about this hero, but you're going to find out during the reading of the book, at the end of the book, that there's a reason why I chose him. And indeed, you read Brothers Karamazov, which is not an easy book to read, but if you have enough passion and courage and time and patience, you finish the book, you find out that actually this weak hero is extremely durable and resilient. He's the only one from the three brothers and the father as well that survives the whole ordeal without too much damage. Actually comes out even stronger. And I thought, how incredible to choose a hero in your opus, in your oeuvre, in your work itself, the hero that is not actually anything special, but is extremely strong. And then through chance of studying design, I bumped into something called simplicity of design, and I saw beeswax candles in a church, and I thought, this is a wonderful design, and there's nothing opulent about it. It's extremely simple. The form is the fuel. When it's used, it disappears. It comes from nature. Like, I couldn't give any critique to this piece object that nobody designed, and it's just pure. So I started working with candles, experimenting a lot with them. And then I thought, I'm going to work with beeswax, because I started studying the material itself, and I found out that actually beeswax is one of the most durable natural materials in the world. It will easily last thousands of years without deterioration. And I thought it was incredibly fantastic. So we have this material that is sensitive to light, sensitive to temperature, sensitive to pressure, yet, just like Aloysia in the book of Brothers Karamazov, it can survive millennia. And they have found intact combs full with honey in the tombs of pharaohs in Egypt. And the honey in the combs was still edible. Probably not the most culinary experience, but you wouldn't die by consuming it. So I thought, beeswax is really interesting. I want to work with beeswax. And beeswax comes from the only thing that we know, which is the bees. Beeswax is a product of their life, of their labor, and they produce it by sweating it out in the spring and during summer periods. And I thought, let's work with beeswax. Beeswax is an incredible material also to work with. So I started experimenting and making objects by myself, crafting them like traditionally is meant to craft an object by hand, molds and tools. And somehow, I love this sculpture that I made in 2006, so this is a very long time ago. And it's an amphora cast in a mold, traditionally in a wet plaster mold. It's huge. It's about 2.5 meters tall, this whole installation. And it looks like a Greek amphora found in the desert. And I thought, okay, this is not enough. I want to push it further. And then I thought maybe it's interesting to involve bees in making the object itself, me stepping away from the whole equation or adding bees to the equation, and trying to see if I can make a beeswax object directly with the help of the bees. And then I remembered we had these classes when I was still in Slovakia, and I was studying first year art history, and it was all about antiquity and Romans, and there was this really interesting passage about, or a chapter about amphitheaters. And I found out there was a clear distinction between how Greeks made amphitheaters and how Romans built amphitheaters. Greeks used nature to help define the amphitheater's shape. So they used the valleys, they used the rocks, they used the natural shape of the geography to lay down the amphitheater itself. So actually there was very little design. They found the best spot in the nature that had the shape in which they could carve the stones in the rock itself, and it had the beautiful view, and they just built the small stage in front of it. So it was very coherent and in line with the idea that the connection between man and nature is integrated. Whereas Romans, because we were really clever and very technology-driven people, they discovered that they can change this whole equation and build amphitheaters wherever they want, because they create the supporting structure around it, and they had ingenuity, technical ingenuity to support the weight of it. So the famous example is the Colosseum in the middle of Rome. And so I started to looking into how to support natural growth could work, that I actually incorporate nature in my, not only in building, but also as my geography. And then I thought, let's design a skeleton on which, like geography itself, on which the bees can build their honeycombs. And the result was, I make the story really short because there were lots of unsuccessful attempts at this. So this looks like, okay, from that it went to this. No, I had dozens of failures trying to figure out how to do it, because most of my vases collapsed in the beehive due to heat and weight, and they were full with honey. So it was a really something to figure out how to do, but I didn't give up. So this was the result, this beautiful vase that came out of the beehives early 2006. And then not only I started to be proficient in guiding them, but I thought, let's push it even further and incorporate the change of coloration. Now, that's really interesting because bees are red color blind. It's a phenomena in the biology of the bees, where bees, because they need to see the sun through the clouds, they have a shifted spectrum of visibility. So their spectrum of what they see, they miss the red light, which is the one next to infrared, but they see the ultraviolet next to the violet. So just slightly shifted, but exactly the same length as ours. For example, snakes have it on the other side. Snakes see the infrared and they don't see the violet, for example. And we are somewhere in between the sweet and the poisonous. And so I decided to manipulate the coloration of the bees by incorporating red pigmentation in the beehive. Because the natural color of beeswax is white. They don't build yellow wax, they build white wax, and it's colored by the dirt called pollen, propolis, and honey. So there is a way to make the sculptures naturally colored by incorporating red pollen in that sense. So these were the attempts in figuring out how to also alter the coloration of the sculptures. And this was recently acquired by Louvre, or the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, which sits in Louvre. The yellow one before is in MoMA. So these are the two vases. And then I started to, intertwine the two metaphors between skin and the beeswax. This is also with glass, also in Murano, and it's called the seed of Narcissus. So it's a glass seed, and on the interior you have the silver, which creates this mirror effect, 360 degrees. And the bees have built this skin around it, which was the first time for me to also do this technique where it's only one-sided honeycomb. Until then, it was all the time two-sided honeycombs, which you can see also here. So it was also very difficult to navigate the bees this way. But then every hexagon became a tiny mirror by itself. So there was an interesting, beautiful effect of multiplication, and the whole idea of underscoring the seed of Narcissus, or the Narcissus story from mythology. Should be a movie, but it's loading. Yeah? All right, well, it's not moving, so maybe next slide. Oh, went too far. All right, so here we are, skulls. This was an interesting series. It's a very recent series called Memento Vivere, where I returned to this idea of memento mori, which I admire in old paintings, and I thought, let's give it the twist the other way around. So instead of memento mori, we call it memento vivere, as a reminder of life. And I introduced these frameworks in the hives in the shape of skulls, based on some particular person, and then I let the bees do the work on it while stopping it at the point when it still looks like a human skull. Because if I left it a little bit longer, it would actually become completely human. So the process is reversed. It goes from the skull to something very alive, to something very human. And I love it because it's a bit more hopeful than memento mori, which is also true, but it's also just a sweeter tale than memento mori. So this is a series of skulls that I recently worked on. And the whole story, there's I think 3 or 4 pieces that I made on that subject, but they all refer to the story of John the Baptist and the beheading of John the Baptist. And one of the very first skulls was one on the bronze-like dish, which refers to Caravaggio's painting, which is the famous painting of the beheading. And Salome is there, and the head of John the Baptist is on this plate. But I like the idea, later we can talk about it, the idea of sacrifice, which bees do, which us do, which we do. So there is the life as service. That's why every dish is a sort of symbol of service. Also, another recent sculpture based on the myth of Marsyas, or it's not a myth, from the mythology, Greek mythology. It's a really interesting story. So Marsyas was an artist, just like many of us, and he felt really confident about what he does, to the point where he challenged the god of music, Apollo, to a duel. And so Marsyas was a talented, I think they call it the harp as an instrument, but it was slightly different name, I forgot. And he challenged Apollo to a duel. Eventually he lost because Apollo cheated and incorporated vocals in his presentation. So obviously all the crowd that gathered clapped for Apollo, and Marsyas was therefore sentenced, punished by being deflated, which is this kind of famous story where the body of Marsyas is always skinned. So they took the skin away from Marsyas. Very cruel, but typically, Greek mythology, ruthless, doesn't make sense. But I love the story because just like all the artists that I know, we all aspire to be better than we were yesterday, somehow trying to be almost like the gods. And no matter what you do, I mean, you always try to be better at something. And you look up and you have heroes, you have these gods that you would like to achieve their level. So there's nothing, somehow it feels unfair that Marsyas is punished for trying to be good at something. So I created this sculpture to kind of remind myself, but also others, that there is nothing wrong in trying to be better than you were yesterday. And I forgive him by putting the skin back with the bees and the beeswax, which is symbol for soothing, because propolis is a medicament by itself, so it has healing properties. So the skin, again, appears in this work as a healing but also forgiving element on a plaster sculpture of Marsyas, also in Louvre, by the way. And another interesting early work, it's called The Unbearable Lightness Without of Being, clearly based on the book of Milan Kundera, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. And it's a figure made like this. So this is scary and beautiful in the same time. A little bit inspiration from Dali and his famous body floating in the air, his wife looking at him from the left corner. I think you know the picture. And then one of the last pieces is the Nefertiti, which I thought was also interesting, come back to history, also to the whole idea that beehive as an entity, but also bees as a colony, is completely female biology, or essentially it's a female society. Drones, as representatives of the male part, have very little work to do in the whole functioning of the beehive, other than they fly one day a year out on what they call the maiden flight to impregnate the queen, young queen, and then they are cast away and then they die. But they don't collect pollen, they don't build, they just eat, and then they perish. But having said that, the female colony kind of deserved a manifestation of something like a queen in its formal sense. And then I looked at the art history and I couldn't find, like, what would be the most famous iconic woman in the history of art, or let's say history, that has a clear image that comes to your mind when you say the name. And you can say many names, I mean, Cleopatra, and for the sake of argument, I just stopped with Cleopatra. But Nefertiti was one of the very few that there was no doubt when I said the name how the queen looked like. So I decided to do the most famous woman in the art history with the bees and give kind of tribute to the female society that deserved the queen to be manifested. So they made their own queen, almost like a totem and a golden bull. This is a beautiful picture from an exhibition we had at the depot of Boijmans Van Beuningen at the compartment of Lakeside Collection, together with Marloes Roeper. She was one of the best graduates at Ron Mandos, a wonderful painter. And one of the last projects that I'm doing or already did, but the exhibition is going to be in April, and it's very poignant because the war is going on there. I was commissioned by the Israel Museum to do a project together, and the first time that they actually commissioned an artist to do a project inside the museum. So it's, again, a very new thing for them. And I decided to do a portrait of Hadrian, which is a heavy story and very controversial thing, and that's why I love it, and that's why they jumped on it, because Hadrian is one responsible for the destruction of Jerusalem. He's not very liked in the history of Israel, even though he was a great emperor, not in favor of the Jews. So I think in this whole context of what is going on in Israel, I think it's going to be a beautiful exhibition, really big exhibition about the bees and the Hadrian Just a little glimpse of how it's made. So I spent many hours creating these frameworks, designing them from, let's say, a model, a scanned model that comes with 1 million, 10 million vertices or a mesh, and then I try to reduce it by still making it look very recognizable, photogenic. So I basically sculpted in the computer laboriously one by one with these cells, deleting them and making new ones until I can 3D print the framework. And this is me working at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem last year. And these were the beautiful results. I was very happy with it. And hopefully in April we have a really nice exhibition there. And then something for the future. So like if you ask me what are your plans, because you've done so much with this work, you already know what you're doing. I always dreamed for many decades, because I've worked with bees already for 18 years, 2006, so 3, 10, 13, 16 years. I want to do the Volkswagen Beetle with the bees, one to one. It's such a thing that I can't let it go. You can see that the sketch was made in 2011 when I was asked by the Committee of London Olympics to do a project in London. We have chosen for another work, which is actually coincidentally also in the depot of Boijmans Van Beuningen at the Lakeside Collection on display. But this was the original idea, too complicated, too big for that time. So there's something in my pocket that I still want to do this thing. And then, for example, again, connected to the beetle and the factory and the production. I want to do a giant telescope made by bees, a big dish that's rotating on a robotic arm like a sun. So it goes from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it rotates slowly, always indicated the position of the sun, no matter whether it's cloudy or it's dark at night. So thank you very much, and yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, where do I sit?
You sit there, I think.
I hope it wasn't too long.
It wasn't. I think most of us, probably all of us, would have loved you to continue, but unfortunately we asked you also for a conversation.
Yes.
So, and that's the part we're going to do now. Thank you very much for your for talking about your journey, your art, your work, your ideas. Very inspiring. There's so much ways into your work. It's so many layered. So where to start? Maybe start with the fact that you were pointing out to the Giuseppe Pennone, a wonderful picture of his tree where he's revealing the inner tree. And you said, so I like the fact that you need to sort of, how you said something about nature taking form, whether it be a meteorite or so there's a form revealed inside. You can see the branches sticking out. So I see your fascination with forms and getting to know your material. Yeah. There's this wonderful story, of course, about Michelangelo going to the quarries in Carrara, where he could already see inside sort of his big human figures inside the marble in the quarry. And you know that he was very good at finding the right blocks because he knew somehow, you know, that there wouldn't be cracks in it, and he would just reveal sort of his David or others, which reminded me of what you said about
exactly that. Yeah.
About Pennone. Yeah. So, and then finding your material, and we see here two wonderful examples of the material. I could have started, of course, with what you said about skin, but finding revealing what's there already. If we look at these two,
yeah.
Because
this was first.
This was first.
That was second.
That was second. Is there something which was already there? Is it? I mean, it's of course Nefertiti's bust, the wife of Akhenaten, is there. You can see it in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that relate to your forms you're finding?
Yeah.
Because it's more like you're constructing it.
Yeah. The form, so the original form that I started work with was the amphoras and the vases. The bees love these exchanges of pregnant forms, the convex and the concaves.
They do.
They love it. Actually, the natural form of a beehive, when you don't let the bees in the frames and you just let them build in this room, they fly in the corner where there's the warmest, because that's where the warmth goes, and they find a spot in the corner, and they start building these parallel combs that kind of wave next to each other, like underneath a skirt or layered skirt, or the shades next to a window, the curtains, for example. If you fold them together, they nicely sort of think of Richard Serra in the Guggenheim, this complex corten steel waving sheets. Mm-hmm. This is exactly how bees build. So when I saw the picture, for example, of the above picture of the Guggenheim installation of Richard Serra, I was like, this is a beehive.
A natural beehive.
Natural beehive. So
forced into
exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So bees love exactly these shapes, and I started making these original vases and sculptures, having that in mind to introduce to the bees forms that are very much like that. So they wave, they are vase-like, and I said pregnant, but they love this shape, which is like sort of a belly.
Okay, so
So the form is already given by nature. By understanding the material, you use that language to inform your new sculptures. So I can't do rectangular pieces, for example.
You cannot force them into any shape.
Not any. I can force them to certain shapes. So that also limits you, but it also, there's a certain freedom in constrictions.
Yeah. I didn't know that. They love this sort of, so the tiara of...
Yeah, they love the tiara, and also the simplicity of the neck. Actually, this is a deformed vase, if you think about it, because it's an open structure, and it has a neck and the chin, but essentially it's a vase, like an amphora. And so just by changing a little bit that, I was able to do that. And then is it informs other sculptures. Oh, I can do this. This is possible. That's a new information. Yeah.
And you made it, but the bees made it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's your work of art, but the bees made it.
Think of it a little bit like, so you have a composer and you have a conductor. Mm-hmm. None of them play the instruments, but they get the credit for the music. And so that's an interesting part, that I feel more like a conductor of an orchestra, guiding the process and the individual instruments, and trying to make sure that it grows the way it's supposed to grow, and being built the way it's supposed to be built. And so not necessarily, but the planning is like a planning of an architect. So that's where the heritage from my father comes in, where I pre-design the conditions in such a way that I'm able to then alter the process easily. So I open the beehive every day when they build, and I take a surgical knife and I see they have built somewhere where they're not supposed to build. So I cut it away like a heart surgeon operates, and then the bees repair that part and continue building on the frame. So there's a constant conversation between me and the beehive, and they stop at a certain point, so you have to respect that, and then they restart again, so you have to be alert all the time. You can miss a period. Sometimes 3 days you don't look, and then it's completely gone. They overgrow it to the point where it's unrecognizable. So you lost the sculpture, basically, to the nature, to the natural process.
So you need to stop at the right moment.
Yes.
Like the skulls you said.
Yes.
Because otherwise they will grow out of...
And then it becomes this face that is actually a portrait, and you want to keep the essence of, you know, the skull itself. But, you know, to answer your question, I don't make it, but there are concepts. Like, is Giuseppe Pannone, like, what is he then? Just a craftsman? Is it the artist? Is it the craftsman only? Like, executioner of the, you know, he just carves it out. It's already there. It's like following a plan mindlessly, you know.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, or are you an architect? And an architect is an artist, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
And he doesn't build it himself. That's maybe the same metaphor, the same process, the same. And so, to be absolutely clear, you keep bees.
So yes, we have 2 bee farms. I have 1 bee farm that I started in Slovakia. And together with Ali Keles, who is behind the Lakeside Collection, we have built a bee farm in Rotterdam. So I have my disposal 2 bee farms to offset different seasons and different qualities of different geographies. So yes, I keep the bees in the way that I have bee farms, but for each bee farm, we have a beekeeper who's taking care of the bees in the most sustainable, ecological way. And he helps me to build those sculptures as well when I'm not there, for example.
But you actually go in with a little puff. My father kept bees for many decades.
Yeah.
He passed away 2 years ago, but the beehives are empty now. We still have them. But so I went in with him as a young boy, often doing that, and later on less. But you do go in. You get stung by the bee?
I got stung a lot in the past, and it's not a pleasant thing. And I had, and I still until today, I have a bit of a phobia. Which manifests itself when I feel something around my feet.
Ankles? Yeah.
I always get I kick my leg because I have a feeling they're crawling up my trousers, and I got stung many times by realizing when they were too high. You get stung around the area that's painful.
Yeah,
I know. You know which area.
I know.
And it's too late. Like if you kill it, it stings you. If you don't kill it, it stings you. So I'm afraid of that. But we work now in such a way that it rarely happens. But you have that phobia from the past. So I do have that. It's not funny to get stung.
No, it really hurts.
Yeah,
it really hurts. Funny. I just realized I have the same thing. I never knew. If I walk through a field, I have this reaction where I do, because I'm afraid that I never realized that. That's from my youth.
Yeah.
I just realized this moment that I have the same reaction.
Yeah, like oof.
To you because you think you got stung.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I only have it around the ankles because that's where it starts.
That's where they creep in.
They creep in. Yeah.
And that's where it gets really.
Sometimes beekeepers, when the bees are aggressive, they tape their trousers and their socks together.
Yeah. But you still work with them.
But now I know, and we work with very peaceful breed. So you have aggressive breeds and you have more peaceful breeds. We rarely use tobacco, for example. And the trick that I learned and also suits my character because I'm I have a certain character and I'm not slow and I'm not peaceful. It's a little bit the opposite of that. And the bees taught me a little bit to slow down because when you work with the bees, it's the way you appear in calm, that's how they react to you. So when you open a beehive and you open it really slow, nothing happens. They mind their own business as if nothing happened, as if the cover was still there. But if you do it abruptly, you move, you show a sign of nervousness, they react to that and they can attack you. So in a way, it teaches you to slow down, breathe, be there in the moment. So it's a very therapeutical, very spiritual experience to work with bees.
It's your own...
My finding, my personal, the impact of that on me. Yeah.
It's your personal Zen Buddhism.
In a way, yes, correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is my bonsai.
Yeah. Interesting. And you said something about that that you are interested also in the fact that the brothers, it's the same sort of, the same thing is true for the material you use. That it's fragile. You can easily burn it, and you can even with your fingers you can, but it's the most durable material you can possibly use. For it stays fresh for thousands of years. What's this fragility?
I was always a sensitive person through, upbringing, childhood not being the ideal. And so I felt always very sensitive. And this gave me certain, the idea liberated me to be both strong and fragile in the same time. So there is strength in weakness. And yeah, it was just a nice thing to discover that not all the heroes have to be extreme. They can also be completely normal. And then you see also that actually evolution favors normality. Evolution doesn't favor extreme. So most of the animals that survived until today were never the extreme ones in their species. So the fastest, the cleverest, because they always go too far. So and in nature, so for example, there is this example of a certain species of I think it's a little bit above bacteria, but a certain oceanic. I have to look it up because now I'm rolling with you, not prepared. But I read it in an interesting book called it's called Bill Bryson, and he wrote this book called The Short History of Almost Everything. And it's a really nice book, and it argues that the essence of life is just to be. That's its main characteristic. And the second characteristic of life is that not only it just wants to be, it also doesn't want to be much. And it's a really interesting concept. It's actually the whole Dostoevsky thing. Life doesn't want to be much. And if it's not much, it will survive longer than something that wants to be a lot. And it's a nice metaphor for also ambition, like Daedalus and Icarus. Like, be careful what you wish for, or how high you fly.
Close to the sun.
Yeah, close to the sun. So yeah, there's all these aspects. Yeah.
And then you said there's something interesting about this fragility and being able to build something, because in a way, listening to you, I suddenly realized you could look at these bees as small bodybuilders, because they're very fragile. You can, this material they're made out of, this chitin, I mean, they have a skeleton, exoskeleton. You can easily crush them. I mean, they're very fragile, like your works of art. You can crush them. And on the other hand, they build with their body, like you showed the Arnold Schwarzenegger. I thought horrible picture. Yeah, no,
but like a lot of it is in a way horrible. When you show the unbearable lightness, the sculpture, it's also everybody who has an insectophobia or certain phobia from insects, you could look at it as something scary and ugly. So I understand the whole bodybuilding image.
But I thought suddenly, yes, but these small bees, they use their body to their excrements. They have something which they make out of their body.
This is a sweat.
It's sweat.
Literally, they're sweating it out. So it's a product of hard labor. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's kind of fatty substance. Yeah.
And then, because they don't know what they're making.
I'm glad you said it. They don't know what they're making, and that's one of those things that really struck me in the beginning, and that's the unbearable lightness sculpture. That is the reason why I chose Christ-like figure.
The one,
with just the man
hanging.
Yeah. And I thought it was really fascinating because there's some things in humanity that somehow we're prone to be. And one of them is religion. Like somehow we are hardwired we are drawn towards religions all the time. There's something in our brain to follow these kind of ideas or long for these ideas. And
You think that's hardwired in us, that we long for something metaphysical?
well, until today. So maybe tomorrow something comes along and this hypothesis of mine changes, but until now, this is the case.
There's this famous, well, one of the fathers of sociology, Leszek Kolakowski
Yeah.
from Poland, who said, I think one of the most famous things is that man is a metaphysical species of animal. A species of animal that has a metaphysic, a longing for metaphysics.
I think it's somehow the brain itself, like the same thing that we are not used to be like a savant, like have an incredible memory. We forget every day everything. Not everything, literally, but we forget almost everything.
We do.
We do.
Yeah.
And the experience is more based on intuition than some kind of a machine-like memory. And this intuition cannot evaluate things all the time like a computer. We feed on certain instincts. And somehow religion fills this gap with, you don't have to evaluate the universe around you like a scientist. It allows you to go on with faith.
Yeah.
And it's a very useful tool to get on with life for most of the people. Not for everybody, but for most of the people. So my feeling is we are somehow programmed to be drawn to this technique of surviving life with faith rather than without it. And so that brought me to, Kundera and Dostoevsky and Camus especially. I loved the whole myth of Sisyphus story. And so the unbearable lightness is about this. The bees are participating in something they have no idea about. And that's most religions, that's what they do. They are essentially, all the followers are participating in something that's bigger than them. You don't know what God is. The God is unknowable, but somehow you blindly are destined to follow that you have an instinct to believe. So the bees are building the Christ-like figure because somehow I touched the DNA of them and manipulated them to do this, and they have no idea, but they do participate. And we are somehow a little bit like this. There is this external force that makes life, and we participate in this theater of life.
This project,
for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't know. Yeah, but so they're building their queen. Eh?
But they don't know.
But they don't know.
Yeah.
You know.
I know, but I'm sort of like this. So I don't want to be narcissistic, but I'm the god.
Yeah. Okay. I was trying to
as a metaphor. I don't literally mean it, but it's this.
I don't mind.
as an example of how we are as a society, that there is this thing that is unknowable, unseeable to us, and somehow it guides us to do things, and we have no idea how and why.
We're driven by forces.
Yes, and I find it's a fascinating state to be in, that you kind of give up the idea of complete control.
But if you look at the bees, the ants, if you look at your work, you think about that they built something which they don't know that they participated in, which might be a thing of beauty or a thing of significance or, a portrait. But then you could also say, well, we won't understand anyway. So.
But we create beauty in between. So this is kind of biblical thing, like you can only create good when you don't know that you're doing good. Like I think there's from Bible something about left hand. Let your right hand not know what your left hand is doing.
In the Bible, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting. Like as soon as you know you're doing good, it's not good. That kind of the essence of goodness is that you're not aware.
Yeah, or that you're not rewarded for
exactly.
The Calvinist.
Like the goodness comes from within, rather than some kind of a calculated decision that feeds your ego or feeling good about it. So not knowing is actually essence of it.
It's wonderful. I mean, the parallels between our society, of course, and the society of the bees. They're very many.
They're essential. They're good, and we don't know what our role in the universe is. Like we maybe are not meant to discover it. So the idea that we just are meant to be here and do what we do is liberating.
And then a personal question: do you think about these things after you've done and worked with the bees for so many years, or is it something which was before there?
Well, I always was drawn to philosophy and literature, movies, stories, and contemplating. Mm-hmm. But I conceive a lot of these sculptures, so I wouldn't do Ataturk without any background to it. I wouldn't do Nefertiti without any ideas behind it, so I wouldn't do the Abraham Lightness. So there is a mental preparation, philosophical preparation, but the rest is, typically artistic. But I do think about these things prior. These sentiments are brewing inside me all the time. Yeah.
Because if you're saying maybe we're not meant to understand the universe, like the bees are not meant to understand that they cannot possibly, don't have the brains to understand Nefertiti. And they have not the physical existence of their nerve system. It's impossible for them to understand Nefertiti. So in that respect, we might not have the brains to understand the universe we're in.
Yeah, but I find, and that's the liberating part of it. And
why is it liberating?
Well, it's just like
it's also very.
I think most of you know the myth of not myth, but Camus' interpretation of the myth of Sisyphus.
Sisyphus is
the guy who rolls the rock.
Rolls the rock up,
and he has this incredible interpretation of it, which is the myth of Sisyphus is it's a punishment. So he rolls the rock, and then the rock is on the top and falls down, and he does it again. So it's like internal convict, and it's a very sad thing. And Camus comes up with this incredibly liberating interpretation that he's the hero. Sisyphus is the hero because he's an absurd hero, which actually repeats in Unbearable Lightness of Being, and But
Milan Kundera had read, of course, the myth.
Yeah, well, he read a lot of true.
So probably the root is.
Yes, it is. But Camus says that it's Sisyphus. So why does Sisyphus go back and rolls the rock again? If the falls down, the whole idea is, okay, and it goes up. I'm stopping. I'm done. This is not working. But the Sisyphus admits the irony of it and keeps on going with life because that's the way it's supposed to be. And so this is the point. It's very liberating because he takes away the whole cognitive understanding of why I'm doing this. I need to have a reason to go up. And
there's no reason.
There is no reason. And he kind of it's the acceptance of the ordeal, acceptance of life. This is the fact. And he goes and does it again. And it's this freedom of being aware that this is a punishment and that it makes no sense that he is, absurd hero, but it's also very liberating. So the whole myth is reinterpreted in a kind of very positive way, which it's paradoxical because existentialism is very dark in essence. Sartre, Camus are the same period. So Second World War, etc. But Camus is very humanistic compared to, he's much more, not sweeter, but, there's more to get from Camus than from Sartre, because Sartre and then, is dark.
And you think it's liberating because he accepts the absurdity and moves on and keeps rolling the stone and is liberated from the fact that there's no need to do it and that's an absurd punishment. And
so it's the same as forgiveness, for example. How do you move on? You have to accept it. Mm-hmm. If you are stuck in somebody hurts you and you're stuck in the hurt, you never move on. You have to accept that this is the way it was and you start over again. The famous quote from Bob Marley, about being with a woman. Every woman is going to hurt you, It's the one you're willing to suffer for, or something in this sense. I don't exactly remember the quote, but it's the willingness to accept that you're gonna get hurt, and it's okay. It's part of life.
Mm-hmm.
So Camus is liberating, or his Sisyphus is liberating.
Let's get back to the And by the way, it reminds me of the fact that at the end of his life, Goethe said, my whole life was das ewiges Wälzen eines Steines, the eternal rolling of a stone.
Yeah.
And that he actually liked it.
Yeah.
So a great poet was akin to Sisyphus at the end of his life. But reminded me of. But you seem to be something of a Sisyphus as well, doing all those work all the time again. We've asked Kirian Esser to read out a part of a specific passage, and we're going to listen to it, of the Brothers of Karamazov. We hear Mitya, Dimitri, who is in jail, and the socialist writer Misha Rakitin wants to write an article about him, and he's talking to his brother Alyosha, who is very dear to him. And Dimitri is the brother who spends his money on women and champagne, and Alexia is the more kindred soul of the two. We're going to listen to a passage. We'll discuss it afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is Alyosha and Mitya speaking. We just fall in the middle of the scene. Why is it all over with you? You said so just now, Alyosha interposed. Why is it all over with me? The fact of it is, if you take it as a whole, I'm sorry to lose God. That's why it is. What do you mean by sorry to lose God? Imagine inside, in the nerves, in the head, that is, these nerves are there, in the brain. Damn them, there are sort of little tails, the little tails of those nerves. And as soon as they begin quivering, that is, you see, I look at something with my eyes and then they begin quivering, those little tails. And when they quiver, then an image appears. It does not appear at once, but an instant, a second passes, and then something like a moment appears. That is, not a moment, devil take the moment, but an image that is an object or an action, damn it. That's why I see and then think. Because of those tails. Not at all because I've got a soul. Rakitin explained it all to me yesterday. Brother, it simply bowled me over. It's magnificent, Alyosha, the science. A new man is arising, that I understand. And yet, I'm sorry to lose God. Well, that's a good thing anyway, said Alyosha. That I'm sorry to lose God? It's chemistry, brother, chemistry. There's no help for it, your reverence. You must make way for chemistry. And Rakitin does dislike God. Oh, doesn't he dislike him? That's the sore point with all of them, but they conceal it. They tell lies, they pretend. Will you preach this in your reviews, I asked him. Oh, well, if I did it openly, they won't let it through, he said. He laughed. But what will become of men then, I asked him, without God and immortal life? All things are lawful then. They can do what they like. Didn't you know, he said, laughing, a clever man can do what he likes? He said, a clever man knows his way about. But you've put your foot in it, committing a murder, and now you're rotting in prison. He says that to my face, a regular pig. I used to kick such people out, but now I listen to them. Tot daar.
Thank you. Thank you. All things. We just talked about Sisyphus and the absurdity of life, and then you said, well, and then we just listened to one of the brothers saying, well, if God's no longer there, then everything is allowed.
That's a misquote, but its essence is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he describes, his nerve, that actually the images he sees is just his nerves and there's nothing else but that. There's
And
chemistry.
basically neuroscience,
Yeah.
and in those times they didn't know what to call it, but yeah.
Yeah, and so the image in your head is just neuroscience and it's nothing else. You lose your soul, and if you lose your soul, you lose your God.
We become machines, yeah.
We become machines, exactly. And that's sort of the root, maybe, of the absurdity of life, where you roll your stone every day, because there's no significant, there's no destiny, there's nothing like a big
Fate,
plan. No.
The predestination in that sense, yeah.
Yeah. Is that sort of your biggest fear? That it's all without any purpose?
Well, I don't know if it's a fear, but I love the idea of purpose. I think there is a meaning. Well, purpose is a meaning, but something becomes lighter when you have a meaning. The life becomes more energized when you have a purpose, and so I think I'm afraid of having no purpose. It's like the ship that's just without destination. Even though Zen Buddhist would argue, but you arrive where you're supposed to arrive. But I love the idea that you pull those sails up and you have a given goal in life, and there's something that you might not be aware of, but as long as you give into it. So, for example, the birds that fly from north to south, just yearly migration or seasonal migration. This torture of thousands of kilometers, some of them dying en route, going from north to south. And there's a purpose to it. So it's worth suffering for. And so these are quotations you can find anywhere daily on Instagram, that no goal is unsurmountable if you have a purpose.
But you're afraid that you're nothing more than a machine, in fact.
Yeah, well,
A biological
that's why I
machine.
deal with the unbearable lightness with the bees, that somehow they have a purpose that's bigger than them and they're not aware of it. So if I see them succumbing to it, maybe I should do the same. Trust that there's a purpose, because somehow we want to cognitively we want to see it on a piece of white paper and say, my purpose is like these 3 words or something.
These God or these whatever.
Yeah,
or
and it
these
has to be
socialist
so
ideas.
purpose has to be literal. And maybe purpose is what I said at the early beginning, is life on itself. To be here and now the best version of you. And you meet people, you talk to people, you enrich yourself, you follow the instinct of the talent that you have, that you feel you have, you're drawn to things, whether it's singing, politics, literature, you go for it, but you become the best version of yourself, like Marcias. And it's okay. But you don't have to understand. Maybe the destiny will suddenly, you arrive always at the point where you think your whole life you were supposed to be an artist, and then you discover in your 60s you're meant to be a politician. Yoeri. So there is a thing that you might not understand the purpose, but you have to just believe in the process. Yeah.
So by giving this society of bees a purpose, which is building a thing of beauty or their queen or their portrait, you hope, or you can imagine, that we, as a society of men, go through the same process.
Like becoming all-female society?
Yeah, no. Like having a purpose, which together we build something with as a purpose.
Yeah, but this eternal struggle of, I'm as much as I'm a strongly spiritual person, but I'm not in favor of organized religions.
No, I understand.
And so I have a sense of, being in touch with something that's bigger than us, but I'm not, I don't have this calling. So better societies for me, I don't know if it exists because as I said, we didn't talk about it, but I come from a country that was for a long time influenced by communism. And so I hate all the utopias, both fascism and communism. And I feel like Tony Montana sometimes. When he was interrogated, they asked him, like, you're a communist. And he said, he got offended. He's like, I kill communists for fun.
Yeah.
So I have this thing against utopias. So I don't believe in a perfect society. And in that sense, looking at the bees as a model, it's more or less the inspiration to be who you are, the best version of yourself. But this hardcore modeling of perfection is something that I'm finding myself the whole life. I'm a perfectionist, and I work with the most torturous process which I don't have under control, and I let that that healing process kind of start with me, that actually have nothing under control. The whole life is incredibly actually it's all Greek mythology is based on that. It's unpredictable, it's cruel, it's not fair, etc. And you go and think, okay, it's that. And then it becomes liberating because you already know it. So you don't become angry at life that do you deserve more, or this is not fair. Am I all over the place? Like, tell me.
No.
Like, I'm shooting everywhere.
And it just crossed my mind, of course, that the bees are a perfect metaphor for communist society as well, of course.
Yeah.
But let's not go into that because we want to go to the audience as well a little bit later on, because there's this whole aspect, of course, of the fact that you're working with a material with bees, and bees are. There's this whole ecological part of it we didn't even mention. And there's so many paths we could take for another hour of conversation. And one of them is maybe ecology, and the fact that the material you work with, bees are endangered species. And bees are almost gone because we use so many pesticides, because our landscapes are so sort of damaged and scattered.
Monocultural, yeah.
Monocultural, yeah. And bees can't really survive in a monoculture. No. Yeah. They need diversity. Yeah.
Which is a great, again, metaphor for, we need more diversity.
Yeah.
Like current state of society now, where we are so apart from each other, diversity is one of the key words. So, and it's an essential thing for life. You can see it in nature. Mm-hmm. The strength of biology comes from diversity, and they could argue strength of society comes from diversity. And so
also the healing power of obviously honey and wax, for centuries has been. And if you have a cough, what do? You take honey and it heals. It heals skin. If you burn your skin, you put honey on it. It heals the skin. And the metaphor of martials, where the skin is put back. And then, of course, there's this this whole bio-industry, which is monoculture at its worst. Thousands, 10,000, maybe 30,000 pigs in one place. But what you do is in a very positive way, is bio-industry. Not in but it's it's farmed. And the farms makes pieces of art, it makes sculptures.
Yeah. Well, so it's not biomimicry, because that would be me trying to carve from wax something that looks like a honey.
No, not biomimicry, but bioindustry.
So so it's not biomimicry. It's also not like What did you say?
Industry.
Bioindustry. Because bioindustry engineers biological processes. So you create artificial meat. You grow meat. So I am somewhere where working with the bees is a little bit like, and I mentioned it earlier, guiding a natural process, like a bonsai. The artists that make bonsai trees, make is not a good word, that grow bonsai trees. These are masters, actually, of Zen Buddhism. So it's interconnected, just like martial arts with spirituality. Also, bonsai as an art form is connected with spirituality. They guide the growing process of the tree by cutting the branches and in a very prolonged process, guiding the energy flow of the tree so that it becomes the picture they have in mind. But you could argue this is, is it artificial or it is natural? And I love this because it's not with the human touch, it's the process itself. And then think of rivers, like, us building dams or guiding rivers in a different direction. It's called, industrialization of the landscape. But you could argue the geography forces the river to flow in a certain way because the rivers, the water's nature is to find the least resistance. It will somehow go upwards if it needs to go. It will find the way it's supposed to go with the least amount of resistance, but it creates a form. It creates its design. And so the element of who is guiding what is for me very blurry because there is we are all together here, geology, nature, technology. But I think I'm further away from bioengineering or bioindustry because this is pure nature doing what it does, just in a different form. And I think about it more as a bonsai rather than a stake grown in a lab.
I came across this amazing quote from you while studying your work and reading about you. It says, you said somewhere in an interview, maybe it's time to admit that contemporary art doesn't have any aspirations to be part of solving the problems we face.
Yeah.
And then you listed the whole list of problems we face, ecological problems mainly, but other problems as well. Which is, for a large part true probably. It really struck me. But then I wondered, reading your quote, the interview, I wondered, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Was it...
That it's not part of it?
Yeah.
Well, there are examples of artists who are engaged. Ai Weiwei is a good example of being engaged with what's
He's
happening.
in Rotterdam now, wonderful exhibition.
Yeah. Fantastic. And recently we talked about Nan Goldin, who was engaged in the whole taking down of the big pharmaceutical company. And so you could be engaged, and it has some kind of a bigger impact than just the artwork itself. Because artwork itself can be beautiful and poetic and just fantastic. But if it has a dimension that goes beyond it, I think it only does it good. It becomes bigger by itself. And then you can think of, okay, Picasso does portraits of rich people, but he also does Guernica. And there is a dimension to it that's bigger than just a painting. It is a certain engagement in injustice and terror and commenting on politics. So in that sense, I find that dimension kind of missing sometimes in a lot of contemporary art. Not saying it's not there, but I love when it's, because I come a little bit from the design background of father being an architect, there's always some kind of a social dimension to your creativity. Like it's your art is in the service of people. Sound like a communist, but that's not what I mean. The idea of, so Michelangelo does the staircase, does a tomb, does a Sixtine Chapel, and it's all kind of art mixed with purpose.
Yeah.
The Sixtine Chapel is sort of like IMAX movie theater at that time. So you could think of it as a high-end commission. He could easily be a director in Hollywood, like one of those blockbuster movies. But it was a very, he communicated something that church needed, and as tell us stories from Bible because people are illiterate, and do it in the most bombastic way, so we look really good as a church. So you empower us as well. And in the same time, it's beautiful, artistic, innovative, crafty. So it had this whole kind of what Goethe called gesamte Kunstwerk. It had all these ingredients. And now, because the contemporary art became more compartmentalized, and we are, living in a different market, you took that away from people. So you have what we call contemporary art is less engaged with general public, and general public is more touched by movies from Hollywood or songs on Spotify, whereas visual contemporary art has less and less kind of monumental impact, other than being beautiful and poetic and etc. But that's not saying everybody does it. So my feeling was that when I said that.
So the short answer is yes, it's a pity.
Yes,
it should have.
No, I like that. What we talked about, the Ai Weiwei is incredible because, it's poetic, it's beautiful, it's simple, it's crafty, and, it's personal comment on politics and what's going on around him. Yeah.
Personal comment on politics. You're originally from Slovakia. There's a war going on in the country next door.
Ukraine. I don't like it.
Something to make art about?
I made a sculpture which we're supposed to show here, but we didn't finish it in time. But I made a sculpture that commented on this war. It's called Spartan. It's this large torso, actually. It's quite large, with the red mohawk and, yellow figure and then a blue pedestal. So it's like this whole combination.
Ukrainian.
So the
colors?
Ukrainian colors, and then the mohawk being red is but I don't have a good feeling towards, let's say, Imperial Russian politics, because I have a personal experience with communism and how it worked, and it's a terrible thing what's happening there.
Just looking at the audience, maybe there's a question, but hold yours for a little, one more last, because this is very gloomy sort of ending.
Yeah,
so I'm going to end with this part with this amazing piece you showed me, and you brought the book with it. This is a book, Guerlain, and that's one of the greater perfumes. And you made a bottle for them.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful story and anecdote. So we're not going to end with, the war in Ukraine and the Spartan.
Yeah. Well, you can maybe tell a story a little bit how the French are in love with the bee in their monarchical emblem.
I can, yeah. The bee. Well, Guerlain has a bee as well, isn't it?
So the Guerlain as a brand, perfume brand, has a bee in the logo.
Yeah. And on their bottles. Well, the bee. I don't know whether you knew, but the bee is Napoleon has the bees on all his robes and that sort of things, because he wants to portray himself as a monarch, as a French monarch, and the French monarchs, the Bourbons, and but even the older ones, and even Charlemagne, and even the Merovingians, where Charlemagne comes from, have these golden bees as their symbol, because it's the symbol of a animal which brings this golden substance, the honey, which is of course a symbol for the soul and the light of God. So it's the symbol of the French king, is the bee. And that's probably why Guerlain has it on their perfume.
Because it was one of their first perfumes was a gift during the coronation of, I think, his son with I forgot the name of the queen, and it was this gift to them from Guerlain, and became this iconic bottle that you see now. It's called the bee bottle. Literally, it's called the bee bottle. And they asked me last year to reinterpret
The bee bottle?
The bee bottle, which is quite large. And we did it here in Rotterdam at the Lakeside Bee Farm. And yeah, it was this one-off project that went somewhere to Qatar, and we made one bottle, and one specific perfume was designed for this.
This is this one bottle?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And there's only one perfume?
And it's only one perfume with it. And it was called the Bee Garden. That's the name of the perfume. So it's a lovely project, with Guerlain. But then you discover these things, like you just said. It's incredible where the bees appear throughout history, whether it's Europe or Asia or Egypt, and how many relationships it has with art history, architecture, society.
Yeah, that's a better ending point, I would say. For now, is there anybody who has a comment or
I love this microphone, which looks like Freddie Mercury's.
I'm not going to do that.
It's like I almost have a wish to ask a question myself.
Shell.
Okay.
Thank you for the wonderful conversation. It was really a pleasure to listen to you and also to all the speculations.
Yeah, thank you.
I am getting back to the start of your conversation, where you were at a certain moment more or less behaving like a bee. Because you were telling about what a bee likes and how a bee would like to do a belly, etc. So I think that is not in the conversation, that without knowing what they do, bees can learn while doing it. And bees are living in a family, in a bond, in a group. So if you work with the same families, I presume that they are learning, which is a humanistic thing, and also maybe something about politics. Is it?
Well, we're back in the politics.
Yeah. No, we're back to the art. So my question is, it's a two-way question. What did the bees learn you as a designer to improve their construction?
Good question. Well, I, for example, learned that they like tight spaces, which is a sense of safety and control of temperature. And I learned that there are limitations to... So one of the things that I really like from the bees is the idea of repetition. And we're all prone to hate mundane things, doing the same thing over and over again. And then every time you look at what they do, I'm fascinated by, because you open the beehive and there's this incredible buzzing energy. And somehow, every time I take these sculptures away from them, it kind of feels really sad. And I introduce in the same colony a completely new naked sculpture. They go at it like yesterday never happened. And I wish, like, sometimes I have these sad days, I'm tired and I've done things and I had enough. And then I think of that moment where I take the Nefertiti away and I put in the same beehive 5 minutes. So I put the new thing in the beehive, and 5 minutes later is the same brutal attack of building this thing because they just want to, they need to.
When they would like the nose, they would add the nose to it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So I have to.
So they have memory.
They continue, for example, on the same side when they finished. So if the Nefertiti was in the beehive, and they would be finishing the left side, sometimes we turn the objects depending on the activity where it is, can be left, right, front, back. We put the new object in, they continue on the same side. So that's the memory they have, but it's also the memory of the energy that they have. So metaphor, like, as a residue of what I learn for myself, that would be the continuous energy, but they have literally a memory when they work. They also They can recognize beekeepers if they work with them, so by the smell. And I think I've read somewhere or somebody told me that also they pass it on to new generations. We didn't talk about it. Bees live really short, like 6 weeks maximum. So while building this, like few generations have died, which sounds very sad, but it's also incredibly powerful, like they work themselves to death. But somehow they have the memory of the beekeeper as a passing on of that smell from one generation to another. So they still recognize him.
So they will continue your work when you pass away.
Yeah, in a way, yes. Yeah.
It's like a cathedral, isn't it? A medieval cathedral.
It's like, what is it, Sagrada Familia?
Yeah,
like this never-ending architectural project.
Yeah, over generations constructed
Gaudi is
over.
dead, so and it's still being built. Yeah. Actually, Gaudi is a good example of architect obsessed with bees.
That's right. It's built in his cathedral. There are many bees.
More projects were built like beehives in his. Freddie Mercury there.
First there and
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. I just have a small question. You were telling that some of the bees are calmer breeds and others are more aggressive.
Yeah.
And who are better artists? Which of them? And
that's a good
another question is, do they have good and bad moments? So they wake up in the morning, are better artists, or
So I like the second question. I was going to answer. So the first question was, what was it? Sorry for it.
Are they more aggressive, or the different types of bees better artists than others?
The true artist is nature itself. So what's happening around them? The bees, whether they are a carnica, which is like a very friendly sort of the bee, or you have some African bees, which, 400 meters away from the beehive, they already start attacking you. There's no difference in architecture of the bees. Literally, the defining thing is the flora around and the weather. And they are a reactive element. So actually the architecture depends on the nature, the influx of food, diversity of food coming from the nature around the beehive, rather than from the certain species.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the bees are better artists if the environment around the beehive is more diverse, is more in balance, has more different species and.
Yeah, but it's like anti-racial thing. Like, it doesn't matter what race you are; it's the environment.
It's the environment.
Yeah. And the second question was. So definitely, and we don't like those good moments. They can stop building, and actually, a lot of it depends on the queen and her mood. So they are very reactive to the mood swings of the queen bee, which I thought was fascinating to learn that actually the bees are a mirror image of the character of the queen bee, of the mother herself. This is fascinating. That they have bad days, and actually it's a combination of weather and the queen herself. Yeah.
Bad moments, did Michelangelo had bad days? Probably, yes.
But speaking of, because I lose it. It's really interesting about this whole racial thing. So the difference between the queen bee and the bee is when they are born, when queen lays eggs, she lays eggs all over the beehive. The way from one cell is born a queen and from the other is born a bee is dependent on the bees. It's not a different egg. It's the same egg. The reason one becomes a queen is because the bees put in that cell what you call a royal jelly. And in the normal cell, they'll put the normal bee food. So every bee has a potential to become a queen. And I find it fascinating because there's potential in all of us to be kings and queens is what we consume. And I mean, what books you read, what friends you meet, what food you eat, what you do defines what you become. So it's, again, very liberating that you are not predefined, but you are all, we have so many options. So the bees are almost like gives us they give us wings.
It's the eggs are the same,
yes,
but it's the food.
It's the food that changes.
The hexagonal. It's the koninginnengelei in Dutch,
yeah,
the queen jelly, and which is a different kind of food. That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's not in their genetics, the queen is already there.
Yeah, they're the same. The work bees and the queens are the same, genetically the same.
Yes,
just because they're fed differently. That's right. Yeah. There was a question from Lakeside.
Actually, a question, obviously, I know the answer of, but I feel like the audience deserves also part of the technique. And I was wondering if Tomáš would share us how it's possible that the sculptures have no honey inside them. Do you do that yourself, or how does it work? I mean, I was flabbergasted when you told me, and I've seen it, but I missed a bit of the technique because of time, but maybe you could inform the audience.
Yeah.
Where did you put the honey?
Where do I put the honey?
Yeah.
So when the Nefertiti was finished, it was not literally 100% full, but it was very much full with honey. So all the cells were mid-full with what you call actually nectar. It's not yet honey. So, and it's impossible to work with it, to take it out, even to take out the sculpture itself out. And really difficult to clean it as well. So when I started working with the bees many years ago, I tried to just take the sculptures to my home and put it in the shower and just kind of try to wash it away, and it never got out because the capillary powers, I think it's called power or strength, capillary strength, is so strong that the water doesn't wash it away completely. So it always there's a residue of nectar in the cells. So I had a really headache from how to do the sculptures so that they are also ready to be put in the museum and have archival purposes. So I don't have biological material that decays over time. And so we found a way after talking to beekeepers. So my question first was, how do I get the honey out? And the beekeeper's like, I don't know, let's put it outside and let the ants eat the honey and take it away. That didn't work because the ants are really small and it's unpredictable and it's in the open air and can be damaged. So we found a way eventually to separate the sculpture from the beehive in such a way that it's still in the beehive, but the bees have a limited access to the space. So they start to think, okay, this space is now hard to control temperature by, and it's hard to access, and they transfer immediately all the nectar from the sculpture back into the original hive. So we lose absolutely zero honey. They keep all the honey that they collected, and they clean the sculpture 100%. It's like licking a plate. There's no honey left, no nectar left. So the sculptures are pure beeswax, so pure structure, no honey left. And then you can harvest the honey or not. It's the decision of a beekeeper because they put it back in the frames, which you can use or they can use for later. So yeah. To answer your question, we make sure that the bees don't lose the honey or nectar.
I think there was a last question here.
Last?
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, last.
And around.
I cannot resist sharing the story with you and all of you that Roald Dahl wrote about a couple who had a son that was growing up much too slowly until the father realized the miraculous power of royal jelly. And they start to feed their child enormous quantities of royal jelly. And at the end of this story, basically what happens is that small yellow hairs start to appear on his skin, and slowly but certainly he is turning into a giant bee. So maybe this is an experiment that you should try out.
Yeah. So you are volunteering, or?
I hope you would.
Okay. So Harry Tomáš Libertíny. Nice.
Turning into a queen.
Turning into a queen. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. All right.
If you're sure, then we might have a drink at the bar, and maybe Tomáš is there for people who are too shy or too slow in a good way to ask questions now. I just remembered about a personal story. I remember suddenly, I think I told you that my father, before he passed away, told me that, of course, not too long before he passed away, a few months before, he said, of course, you need to tell the bees, of course, when I'm gone. And I said, yes, I will. And he said, yeah, because you need to. That's what you should do. So, and that was sort of the only thing he said about his bees. But make sure you tell them that the imker, that the beekeeper is gone. And then we discussed this. And then you said...
Very touching, yeah. You tell them.
You said, well, that's what because the queen in England keeps bees.
Yes.
She's not only the queen bee of England, but she has a lot of queen bees around. And you told me that after she passed away, there was an official visit of one of her beekeepers
Royal beekeeper, yeah.
to tell the bees of the queen that the queen was gone.
Yeah.
So
it's a protocol.
It's a protocol. I didn't quite realize. I did tell the bees that my father passed away.
It's very touching. It's beautiful. Yeah.
And I just remembered because you said that you told the story of Roald Dahl. That there's many beautiful stories to be told about bees.
Yeah, we
haven't even started. We did our best though, and you did your best thank you for speaking again 1 hour and 1 hour. And thank you, Kirian Esser, for reading to us the Gebroeders Karamazov, the Brothers Karamazov. Thank you for coming. Hope you have a drink and hope to see you soon again with other projects here.